everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Magic Morning Wood. As always, I am your host, Ron Scott, and with me is...
Walk like a man, talk like a man. Walk
here we go.
like my soul. Listen to the world and forget about the girl. It's me,
what's
Frankie
happening?
Valli.
What's happening right now? What's happening?
Hello, Ron. Yeah, it's
Hi.
me, Clive. It's not Frankie Valli. Surprise. I wasn't hitting the high notes, so you probably guessed it wasn't the real Frankie Valli.
Okay. Well, was that some sort of reference to what we're talking about today?
Oh no, it's just that song's been knocking around my head all week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen Walk Like a Man with Howie Mandel?
No, and neither have I seen Jersey Boys either.
Oh. Well, yeah, very different film, but
no, but it's
that is Frankie Valli. Yes,
yeah,
yes, yeah. I know, and the Four Seasons, right? So,
Any good? Any good? Either of them?
I haven't seen Jersey Boys, but I've heard it's excellent. Yeah, I know people are like big, huge fans of that. I've heard people talking about it. I'd like to see it at some point. But Walk Like a Man, I haven't seen since I was a kid. I remember I used to like it when I was a kid, but isn't that where he's like a dog that's turned into a human or something? I forget.
Yeah, I've never seen it. Yeah, I don't think I ever will. But
maybe I'll put that on the I Hate You Man. So.
There we go.
Yeah. Anyway, well, welcome, Frankie. It goes. He's dead, isn't he? Is that how he speaks all the time?
Yeah.
Hi, thanks for coming. I'm here. Great. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on. So what were we talking about today?
I feel as if I derailed you somewhat. I do apologize.
Nah, there's no rails here. Okay, so today, continuing our mission, I guess, of talking about using loose connective tissue, which was not so loose this time, actually. It was rather strong connective tissue between my last choice and my choice this time. So last episode, I chose The House That Jack Built with Matt Dillon and written and directed by Lars von Trier. And so I decided to go with another Lars von Trier movie because he's interesting and has and sort of inspires discussion, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
In general. And so so I decided to revisit the 2003. 2003, is that correct, Clive? Am I correct in that one?
Yeah, I don't know what your problem is though.
2003 film Dogville. Also written and directed by Lars von Trier and starring Nicole Kidman and a whole cast of a whole whack of famous people. There's Nicole Kidman, Paul Bettany, who else? Help me out. Udo Kier has a tiny part in it.
Yeah, James Caan
has a part at the end. Lauren Bacall, of course. Lauren Bacall is there, and
Stellan Skarsgård, Veliko Ivanek, our old mate Ben Gazzara.
Right, Ben Gazzara, yeah. Blair Brown, Patricia Clarkson, Jeremy Davies,
Philip Baker Hall.
Siobhan Fallon Hogan, who was also in House That Jack Built.
Right.
She was the dumb woman that he convinced to let him come into her house because his badge was being polished.
Right, and having citations added.
Yeah. And narrated by John Hurt.
Yes, yeah. Also, I mean, talk about a co-production. Danish, Netherlands, Sweden, German, UK, France, Finland, Norway, and Italy. A lot of people involved.
Right.
Surprisingly, considering it's where we get to, it doesn't exactly have production values that you'd think would demand funding from all over the world, right? But
but shot in Sweden, I believe, right? So I think.
Yes, somewhere very cold, according to the. I suppose we'll talk a little bit. I don't know if you saw the making of documentary.
I didn't know, but yeah, please fill me in about that. I meant to, but I didn't get a chance to. So yeah.
Right. It's quite interesting. A little bit of background to the film, I think, and if you're interested in Lars von Trier.
And did you watch? There's something about you said the Dogville. There's like cartoons or something you were talking about.
Oh, you didn't watch them clearly then. So
no.
Okay. Well, to be honest, it's not really prescient to this. It doesn't really matter. I might mention them in
I actually to be honest, I totally forgot about them. So
yeah,
what were they called?
Well, the Dogville comedies. I'll get it out of the way now. Then they were just they were called all Barky Dogville comedies. The Barkies as opposed to talkies. They were made like there was 9 of them made from 1929 to 1931, and they were like short films that parodied big films of the day, and the cast was all dogs, like dressed up as humans.
I see. Okay.
It was like wires to make them walk upright, and then they dubbed it. They dubbed in human voices and stuff. So it's basically
right.
dogs reenacting famous scenes from movies.
Like basically the film version of the dogs playing poker painting.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah. And they're kind of quite funny if you've never seen them. But they did come under scrutiny as to whether they were, animal cruelty or not. I think it's kind of difficult to tell by today's standards whether they were or not, right? But they were called Dogville comedies, and I always wondered if complete coincidence or if Lars von Trier got the title Dogville from the Dogville comedies. And they're just a little interesting thing. Not to, it's kind of lost to time a little bit. I don't think people, plus as well, because of the potential for animal cruelty, I suppose, they're not the kind of things that are welcome in today's world, right? Those kind of things. But if you've never seen them before, you can find them. Go on YouTube, just type in Dogville comedy, and I think almost all 9 of them are there. And they're short and they're kind of funny if you've never seen, because they're quite well done. They're not cheap, they're not short, they're really well put together. And you see dogs walking around in dresses and shooting guns, and kind of interesting curiosity item from.
Right.
That's all that was.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so maybe you can pepper in any thing you learned from the documentary, I guess.
Yeah, as we go. Yeah.
I actually wish I had watched it. I just slipped my mind, to be honest. But was there a lot of interesting information from there?
I think it's not necessarily a great documentary if you don't know much of it. So, I mean, yeah, from what I can tell, this wasn't exactly it was a very intense shoot.
Yeah.
And particularly, and you can tell by watching it, because what they did, they installed on the set, like a booth, like a video booth, like a video diary booth kind of
right
thing, and it was apparently 24 hours a day. You could just go in there and vent if you wanted.
Yeah. And they're almost all venting about Lars, right? So
well, I mean, not all of them are really. No one. The only person who really seems to really not want to be there is Paul Bettany.
Paul Bettany, yeah, apparently, yes.
Yeah.
Who apparently has vowed never to even watch this movie. He's never seen it.
Yes, I think he felt as if he didn't have autonomy as an actor. He felt as if he was being used as a puppet or whatever.
Puppet, yeah.
Yeah, and there's certain things with Stellan Skarsgård. Stellan Skarsgård takes it a bit more in good. Like Paul Bettany just looks miserable. Stellan Skarsgård kind of plays around a bit with Lars and kind of teases him and stuff, and you can tell some other people are fraying a little around the edges. But not many people seem to full on. It's not so much that they think he's a tyrant, or it's a fact that they don't actually really mention in the documentary is that Lars von Trier does have, serious kind of depression and anxiety issues and anxiety attacks and stuff like that. So there's parts of the documentary where everyone's like, he's kind of acting up a little bit, or kind of being a bit sharp, or you're just thinking being tough to work with, but at the same time everyone's kind of like huddled around him, like stroking his back and trying to calm him down, and you don't really know what's going on,
right?
So it's a weird mix of camaraderie and like everyone just having kind of had enough of it, but they seem to give him a lot of latitude to be himself, and everyone seems very understanding, and it doesn't look as if he's taking advantage of the situation. It clearly, he seems like a man. Life seems kind of a struggle for Lars, it has to be said, which makes, you know, his achievements all the more seem quite impressive in a way, because he clearly just wants to roll up in a ball sometimes and just hide from the world, you know.
Right.
Yes, I would recommend checking it out.
Yeah, I would like to see it.
The one that's on YouTube doesn't have subtitles for the non-English. I mean, you can still get what's going on, but sometimes Lars and Stellan Skarsgård speak together in either Danish or Swedish, I'm not sure, and you don't know what's going on, but but it's mostly English.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So is that documentary basically just all those videos strung together, or is there anything else there?
They're kind of peppered in. There isn't that much on the DVD extras. Apparently, there's more of those in isolation. They have their own kind of section of the DVD where you can watch more extracts from the video booth.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know how interesting that would be, just to watch some actors mourn.
Does he have that video booth on all of his sets, or just this one?
I don't know, actually. As far as I know, this is the only time that we've seen it. Right. Yeah. I don't know. And obviously, it's kind of interesting. Something like that just doesn't pop out of nowhere. He clearly must have anticipated.
Yeah. I mean, you don't put a place for people to vent about you without knowing that people are going to want to vent about you, right?
Right. Exactly. So yeah, maybe, I don't know, but or maybe he felt something specifically about. I mean, I say that people, you know, that he's not, you know, that people have sympathies, but then again, on the other hand, I think he's not. You know, he's clearly a provocateur and likes kind of poking
the bear
as well. Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I don't know how much. Obviously, you'd have to work with him to actually
really get
find out how sympathetic you find it. Obviously, Paul Bettany wasn't kind of.
Yeah.
I don't know if Paul Bettany, like, I don't know if he's ever. I know he said that he wouldn't work, but I don't know if it was along the lines of like, well, that doesn't work for me, or if he was like, you shouldn't work like that. Do you know? I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, he's not saying it very well. Yeah. Apparently, Nicole Kidman also had said the same thing after this movie, but then changed her tune and then had originally agreed to be in Nymphomaniac Part 1, but then had to drop out because of scheduling, apparently. So.
Yeah. Which is a hell of a story. I'm wondering how is that like she got. I mean, you know, I can just imagine as production date got near, the memory
maybe she's
of Dogville.
Yeah, maybe it was she got hit by PTSD, and I was like, I got something else to do. Sorry.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
So, but some people, I mean, like Siobhan Fallon Hogan and Stellan Skarsgård will work with him multiple times. So at least, you know, it's
right. But it's
don't universally hate him.
You obviously read the same trivia as I did. It's interesting that Stellan Skarsgård, even though he has worked for him multiple times, apparently he talked Paul Bettany into doing it, right?
Yes, yeah.
And then when Paul Bettany turned up and he said, hang on, you said this would be great. And Stellan Skarsgård said, yeah, I lied, basically. Because otherwise you wouldn't have done it if I'd have told you the truth. So, so it's clearly not plain sailing for them either. But obviously they get something out of it. Paul Bettany.
Yeah, but as you said, he seems to be more playful with. So it sounds like almost like they've got kind of like a friendship that goes back, and they sort of understand each other, and that's why they keep working together and stuff. But
right,
Stellan just has more of like a thick skin for him, or just knows how to take him better, I guess, right? And
or it's some kind of Scandinavian bond or something that is penetrable for others, or I don't know.
right, yeah. Like Paul Bettany was not akin to. So poor Paul.
So what's Dogville all about then, Rob?
quick summary of Dogville. It's a very, very long film. It's 3 hours long.
Yeah.
I had forgotten it was this long, so I hadn't seen it once before. First time,
Yes.
second time for you, Clive? First time, second
Yes.
time?
And to your point that I had also forgotten there was a long film, which I think is actually says something about the film.
Yeah.
It's credit that we didn't. Our
remember
memory
that.
of it wasn't that it dragged, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
And it didn't really drag.
No,
despite that. I mean, yeah, there are definitely parts that could have been, cut out, whatever. But considering what happens in this movie and how, static most of what happens is, it's quite. It says a lot for it that it holds up for a 3 hour watching.
Yeah.
So basically, it's divided into 9 sections and a prologue, so 10 sections, I guess, technically, right?
Lars von Trier likes his sections, doesn't he?
He likes his section, likes his chapters. He's very kind of literary, I guess, in that way. Yeah. And they each have a title, kind of thing. So idea in German. And basically, the story is it's a town set in the mountains in Colorado in the 20s. And it's sort of a very, very, very small town with only like less than 20 residents in this town, but they somehow kind of make it work. And they live in the mountains, kind of isolated from everyone, and they have their own everyone has their own little stuff to do and their own little jobs, and they have a little community that they live in. And it's sort of interrupted by the appearance of this kind of mysterious woman who's on the run from some gangsters, played by Nicole Kidman, who's this kind of like beautiful stranger, mysterious woman. And she is obviously hiding from the gangsters. So Paul Bettany finds her and kind of falls in love with her, and decides to kind of convince the town to hide her from the gangsters. And so she slowly but surely kind of becomes part of the town. At first they're very kind of xenophobic and don't want her to kind of be involved and keep her out. Is very, they're very resistant to her joining. But then little by little, she kind of joins and then helps them out, and she starts to do physical manual labor and help them out with their tasks around the town and stuff. And then she becomes part of the town, and to the point where there's sort of like the end of the first act, I guess, whatever, is that she's sort of accepted and becomes, welcomed, and it's all kind of happy things. And then it sort of takes a typical Lars von Trier twist and becomes quite grim and dark, where she, little by little, they start to exploit her and use her more and more and more, and get to realize that they have sort of they can kind of blackmail her into doing things that she wouldn't ordinarily do, because they're sort of hiding her and doing her a favor by hiding her, or at least they see it that way. And at first she's raped by Stellan Skarsgård, the kind of gruff family man, I guess, and then little by little she's raped by a couple other people, and it kind of descends to the point where eventually they keep her as a slave. They chain her up with a bell around her neck and attached to this giant kind of really heavy wheel that she's got to drag around, and still forced to do all of their menial tasks. And at night is systematically raped by every man in the town over and over again, except for Paul Bettany, who, despite the fact that he, quote unquote, loves her, kind of like looks on from afar and doesn't know what to do about the thing. Paul Bettany is also he's a philosopher and wannabe writer who kind of walks around thinking about how he wants to write, and then doing these sort of moralizing sermons with people, trying to change their moral fiber and things like that. That's basically his thing, and he's sort of like in his head a lot, but then not much of a man of action, I guess, right?
He's useless, basically.
He's useless. Yeah, he's just this kind of guy that walks around and tells people he thinks they should be. And
pontificating procrastinator.
Yeah. Right? He's a douchebag, basically, right? So yeah, and then eventually it sort of ends with the that they Paul
Spoilers
Bettany,
ahead, by the way, just in case.
yeah, of course, yeah, spoilers ahead. So Paul Bettany calls the gangsters and decides to turn her in, and that they've decided they want to get rid of her, and that she's now that they've all done terrible things to her, they don't want to let her go because they could turn on them, because they've basically turned into these awful evil people. And so he calls the gangsters, thinking that the gangsters will come and kill her, and it turns out that the gangster boss is actually her father, and she was hiding from them because she disagreed with the gangster way of life and methods. And then so she basically, through sort of a little bit of a how do you say it, like a unbelievable twist, where she just sort of like suddenly decides that these, despite the fact that she's basically been patient and put up with ridiculous things from these people, like slavery and systematic rape, that she just decides, no, actually this town doesn't deserve to live. It's actually, the world would be better if there was no town. And then basically turns all of the gangsters on them, and they slaughter the town, burn it down, and at the end, she, I assume, goes off to become the new gangster boss.
To
the new Bob boss, taking over from her dad.
The mantle, I don't think it's necessarily a problem whether it's kind of realistic or not, because it's
no, I mean,
more of a parable than
realism is not
no
ever
No.
desired in this movie.
So
of course,
we should mention what the film looks like, right?
So of course, the most interesting thing about this film, more than the story and the acting and saying that, is the very, very experimental like visuals that it is, right? So it was, rather than going for realism, there's no attempt at realism whatsoever. It's very very theatrical in general.
Yes.
Like, so it's rather, there's no walls or sets. There are only minor set pieces like desks or tables or beds.
Yeah, the town is laid out. It's like
laid out
chalk lines, right?
Chalk line is a floor plan. So it starts with an overhead view of the town, and all you can see is like basically they've just sketched out where the town would be.
Right.
And the idea is that you're supposed to imagine this.
It's almost like a Monopoly board or something like that, isn't it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this is not an unheard of sort of style that you might see in a stage production. I mean, it looked very theatrical to me. Like if this was done as a play, it would be totally understandable from minute one, right? But as a film, which generally go for verisimilitude, right, which generally goes for more realism, it's definitely stands out as being something different.
Wasn't our town often kind of produced in?
Yes, yeah. So our town is this is like almost like it's very, very, it's like a dark our town basically. This movie basically.
Right.
So yes.
And it's also, I suppose, what's it called? It's the Brechtian alienation device, where you kind of deliberately foreshadow the fakeness of it, and that kind of you just kind of, I don't know, it's part of the overall not message maybe, but it's part of the process, or it's part of the. And we'll get to this later. There's one particular scene where I think this works really well, but it's an artifice, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I mean, Brechtian. It is definitely Brechtian. Right? If anyone knows anything about Brecht, it's specifically about alienation, and then drawing attention to the medium, right? It's drawing attention to it being like a film rather than or in Brecht's case a play, as opposed to like trying to make you think that it's a real thing, right?
It's amazing how fast you forget about it as well, though.
Because
at first it's like, hang on, because you even have people like when they go out of the house, like pretending to open a door that isn't there.
Yeah, they mime the doorknob and saying closing and opening the door behind them and stuff,
and
right?
The only stuff that's actually there's some sparse furniture, and the cars are real, right? Like people don't go brrr, like it's on that septic shock road trip to they actually there's real cars and stuff.
But like the bushes are sketched in, right? They're chalk
Right.
out lines. The dog is a chalk out
Dog,
line until the very, very end of the movie, of course,
Right.
where it turns real, which was another interesting thing.
Mm.
Yeah, and so that's the basically the idea of it. It's sort of like taking sort of something that is sort of traditionally and more of understood or accepted in the theater and turning it and using it on film, which is very, very, very rarely ever done. I read something that maybe you read the same thing, that there's a couple movies that did something similar to that in the past.
Yeah, Louis Malle's last film, right?
Hmm.
Vanyan 42nd Street, I think.
Right.
I've never seen that film, so
Yeah. Neither have I. So
I'm sure there are examples, and then of course occasionally you do get filmed stage plays, which
yes,
which do take advantage of not just having the audience's point of view, like you have stage left, stage right, and which is kind of what this is, except there's no audience, which I think makes a difference for a start. So you're not having that feedback loop of the audience, and of course it's not all done in one go like a stage play. It is done in sequence, and so it's interesting. It's more than just a filmed stage play, and it's interesting because this is exactly the kind of thing this is the kind of thing that if I hear about it, I usually think, oh, for fuck's sake, like but I have to admit, and it'd be interesting if you can pull it off, because I don't think I'm able to articulate why, apart from one specific example. But this really works for me. Like in a way I'd never, if someone explained it to me, I'd think, oh, this sounds insufferable, like fucking exercise in pretentiousness, and I'm just not going to get on with this film at all. But both times watching this film, this totally sucked me in, and I'm not like, in a way, I was thinking about it after it finished. I was trying to imagine if they'd made this film like as a regular film, right? So it's the same story, but it's all like on location, and you went into rooms and out of rooms. Same story. And I was thinking, you know what? I don't think I'd be as interested. Something
exactly.
About the way to do it
You're
is,
absolutely right.
it's a kind of stroke of genius in a way, but I'm not quite sure if I can articulate why that is.
I'm not sure I can either. But I mean, going back to the theater basis of this, which is that it has to do more with the connection. I'd say the interaction between the actors and the audience. In this case, the film audience rather than the stage audience, which it felt more intimate. It felt like you're there with them. And like, for example, several scenes, for example, where she's being raped, and then people are just walking just past, even though technically there is supposed to be a wall there. But the idea that it's so something that you're seeing that's supposed to be so private and that's just supposed to be just these people, but people are just walking past it. It has a different effect. You know what I mean? Like,
yes, that's exactly the scene I had in mind, because the people are acting as if there's walls between them and they can't see it, but clearly the actors are in the same space that it's happening. And more than being just a kind of wonky, arty kind of, oh, that's interesting, it also kind of makes you think about communities. Like, well, if things like this, and they do happen in these small communities, then that is exactly how it is, literally happening just over there.
Yeah. I mean, I live in a small development, and develop with all houses, and like my neighbors are like right there, and I mean, I don't. Yeah, so it's like definitely things that you don't know about. Private things are happening, meters away from you, and you don't even know, right? So
that's how people get away with things like domestic abuse. It's like almost like an X-ray or something through a community, right? And also you tend to, and also the idea that they can see it, but they can't see it, also brings into question things like complicity and, we never knew, but maybe they did, or you turning a blind eye. So there's all this there's all this unspoken stuff at work as you're watching it, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's it can be difficult to articulate and untangle, but it's there. It's part of the package, which makes it actually considering it's a 3-hour film that just takes place on one stage floor.
Yeah, one town, and like literally it's just white walls around it. Like there's nothing outside of it, right?
It's totally absorbing. I wasn't bored for a second. It's a really, and when the ending does come, it is quite the sucker punch as well, right? And
right.
So yeah, I was massively impressed with Dogville both times I've seen it.
Had you remembered this from the first time you saw it? Did you remember?
Yeah, more or less. There are a few details that escaped me, but I kind of I remember the kind of inevitable feeling of creeping dread. That you knew this wasn't going to end well.
Yeah. Right? Well, Von Trier movies never do, right? I mean,
no, I don't think he's lined up for the next Alvin and the Chipmunk sequel.
No, but I mean, of course it was an absorbing movie, and despite the fact that it's very experimental and avant-garde, in this case, I think it does work. But I still can't decide what I think about Von Trier movies in general. Like I haven't seen them all, and I'm still like, on one hand, he's basically a genius, right? I mean, like he does stuff that he pushes the envelope and does interesting things with film that nobody else has the guts to do or even wants to even try. And he does stuff and he does it oftentimes successfully. And certain, and just stuff that doesn't even occur to other people to do. And he's doing like really, really interesting, work, and which is often rides that line of pretentiousness and genius. But at the same time, he is completely pretentious. It's just dripping with pretension, and he knows it too. He knows it too. So I can't decide how I feel about these movies in general, which is that just like going off of The House that Jack Built, which was again not just a horror movie or just like a gory like serial killer movie. It was like often like these long kind of ruminations about the nature of art and things like that. Like even just this, like Dogville using the John Hurt's narration, right? It was often very like flowery, poetic language, all which was written originally in Swedish, I guess, right? And was translated. On my understanding was that he writes everything not in English and it gets a translation. Danish, yeah, and it is translated, right? So it had to be translated, but I assume the original Danish was also just as flowery, right? And so also very poetic and stuff. And so, I mean, coming from a theater background, this movie, I really enjoyed this movie. Just it felt like home for me. It felt like I'm surprised they haven't done, if they haven't done more of like a public like theater version of Dogville, because it would work just as well in the theater as
right. Yeah, I guess so. Yes, I hadn't thought about. Yes, I suppose you could do that, but I don't know. Seeing it in this format, I really struggled to see it in any other format, really. Like as a regular film or as a fully regular stage play where you're only looking at it from one vantage point, right? But,
well, yeah, I mean, it straddles the line, right? And putting it into one or the other. I mean, because having these very stark theatrical elements on a film helps you kind of ride both mediums. Right. But if it was a straight play, you wouldn't have that line of film, right, to kind of put, right? So unless you'd have to do some projections or something, right? So
I'm glad it didn't, I'm kind of surprised it didn't inspire a whole bunch of copycats for people who were doing it for the wrong, because I think that's we mentioned this, I talked about this before when I was talking about Kingdom and shot on video and stuff. One thing I appreciate about Lars von Trier is he's good at choosing the particular medium that fits that story.
Right.
And you can imagine lots of people thinking, oh, that Dogville worked, and so we can make a film without that much money because we just need we just need one warehouse or something and painted on the floor, but it wouldn't work because they haven't you can't tell all stories in that way, right?
Yeah,
You need-
exactly. Yeah,
It's like,
it worked for this story, right? So
yeah, specifically the medium and the story and everything fits it together just right. I think.
right. Yeah. And it's because he writes it himself, right? He creates it for that medium, I guess, right? Is where he gets
Right.
the idea. You get the idea that maybe he saw a play that had, maybe he saw a version of Our Town and then decided to make his own version of it, like,
Right.
on film, right? So
He seems to have had like a rehearsal process as well, which I think is also kind of important.
Yeah.
Rather than just jumping straight in.
Right. And I guess I read a lot about like I mean, it's a parable. I mean, this movie, it's very, it's basically like a fable, right? So I mean, and it's like a morality tale, and whatever you want to call it, like but it's not at all meant to be taken literally.
No, a lot of the same questions about morality and as House the Jack built as well, right? And
right.
kind of the necessity of evil or punishment in it, and there's the only time that the film kind of, I mean, even though it all has this kind of artifice about it, it's still more or less kind of plays out relatively realistically in terms of conversations
the acting
have and stuff. But then when James Caan turns up, that's the only time where the film turns slightly expository, right? And the action kind of stops while she goes into the car and they kind of have a discussion. They kind of bring out some of the themes slightly more implicitly, but not too much. I felt.
Explicitly.
Yeah. And they have a discussion about or how arrogant are you that you think that you can suffer all these indignities almost as if you're a saint or something, and why is the need for vengeance below you, or you owe it to these people to kind of treat them as badly as they treated you, all this kind of stuff, which is kind of fascinating. And then there's not too much of it, right? It just there's just enough of it to kind of pique you, and like you said, whip it up in a way, like it's towards the end that it just whips it up so to parable or fable level, right? And then when the destruction of the town I seem to have turned on our Google by accident. Hang on, let me go.
Hello, Google. Yeah, and then it's also very much like I forgot what I was going to say. Google distracted me. But the acting was all incredibly realistic and quite well done. I thought all the acting was very, very absorbing and it was well acted, right? Which is how well acted it is, right? And there's a whole other point I was going to make. I totally forgot, but
the thing about the acting as well, interestingly, I don't know if this is something that just happens organically because of the way it's shot. It was interestingly pitched between theatrical and screen acting. Like it was slightly more heightened than good naturalistic screen acting, but it wasn't exactly, playing it to the back seats.
Right.
Right. So that was kind of, I'm wondering if that was a technique that they had to try and figure out, or if it was just something that they arrived at naturally. I don't know, because there's a one scene in the Dogville Confessions documentary where Lauren Bacall seems to be struggling ever so slightly with it.
With the acting style?
Yeah, a little bit. Like the pitch is, or rather, she seems not to be giving Lars von Trier what he wants. And she seems to be struggling to find the pitch a little bit. So I'm wondering if it was kind of difficult to, and more, also, like you said, it is well acted, but it's I think there's a certain, because it's so unusual, the setup, I feel as if there's a certain goodwill and suspension of disbelief. So, like, I could tell from the get-go, oh, this isn't quite normally the way things are acted on screen. But then again, I'm not usually seeing it in this environment. So there's a, and then after a little while, it doesn't disturb, and you just kind of settle into it and you accept it, if you see what I mean. So I'm wondering if the whole process was slightly, they didn't quite know if it would land until it was done. I'm not quite sure if you could figure out, because then if you're doing a play, you can feel if it's working or not, right? Like on the stage. But the thing with this is that there's no feedback, and also it's
and I was really worried. I was really interested about how he explained, or you've frozen. How he explained or sold the idea of this movie to the actors before they signed on. Like how he explained what we're going to do here, because there's not much of a precedent for these types of films, right? This. So I would imagine, you had Lauren Bacall or Paul Bettany walking on set, like, okay, hey, where's the set, right? And then him having to explain, well, what we're going to do here, and how did he actually like bring them around? Because we are watching the final product, but I think that there must have been some sort of like, you had to, you were talking about like patting him on the back and really kind of gathering around him as sort of like, you really had to believe in him to even be able to get on board with this project in the first place, right? So,
well, I think that's the thing is, at this point, I think he did have, he had made a name for himself, and he's very much a critical darling that all actors would have wanted to work for, right? So I think that's the thing. If Lars von Trier asks you to be in his movie, then you probably are gonna say, "Oh, really? Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll be in a Lars von Trier movie." It's you get a lot of kudos for that, I think.
Is he a critical darling though? Like, I was reading I wanted to read some just reviews of how this movie was received, and it seemed like a lot of reviewers think he's like, they called him like a childish, like almost like there was a lot of like, I felt like really like negative feeling towards his movies previous to this one, especially, right? That they thought this one was
definitely divisive, but no, I think he's always kind of, critics have always kind of really, he was on the map pretty early on, I think, with things like Europa and stuff like that. I think, people sat up and paid attention. And just to your point earlier about you're not quite sure where you are with Lars von Trier overall. There's a film critic in the UK, Mark Kermode, actually, and there's an interview on YouTube you can see he did with Lars von Trier, and he's famous as well for like loving some Lars von Trier films and then just not getting on with this at all. Like, so he loved this, and he loved Antichrist and some other ones. But he absolutely hated The Idiots. In fact, he got thrown out of the Cannes Film Festival for shouting at the screen. Merde! And he got thrown out. And also he really, really hates Breaking the Waves. I've never seen The Idiots. I have seen Breaking the Waves, and I found it quite... But what I was going to say to you, Ron, is maybe next would be quite interesting in your Lars von Trier watching would be try Breaking the Waves or The Idiots, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, I actually don't think I've seen either of them. I haven't seen The Idiots, and I don't think I saw Breaking the Waves because I don't remember anything about it. I know of it, but I don't think I ever saw it.
Right.
And I haven't seen Antichrist either, so I've been meaning to see that. It's been on my list for a while. So
Breaking the Waves with Emily Mortimer from Punch Drunk Love.
From Punch Drunk Love, So, and I knew that's where she had been from Punch Drunk Love, but I hadn't seen it yet. So,
Udo Kier,
but I did see. I did see Dancer in the Dark, and I did like Dancer in the Dark. Yeah, so,
right. Yes. Again, I think that's on the list of approved Lars von Trier films. That,
is it? Okay, yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see what you think of.
Is Breaking the Waves a difficult watch?
Not in terms of it being like boring or a struggle or anything like that. I think with that film, it's a bit more the what exactly the kind of I think that's one of the films that specifically had which he kind of played around with in House That Jack Built, was one of the films that he was targeted as being a bit of a misogynist. Was on the back of Breaking the Waves. It's kind of difficult. You kind of have to see the film yourself and then draw your own conclusions. But there's certainly potentially problematic themes,
right?
And then Antichrist as well, I suppose, put more fuel on that fire. Although Antichrist seems to have been a bit more, people seem to have been slightly more in favor. Although I'm sure some people really hated Antichrist because there are some, again, provocative scenes.
Where do you stand on it, or on him in general?
Oh, like you, I think he's a force to be reckoned with, and a new Lars von Trier film is always cause for celebration. And I haven't seen a lot of his films. For instance, I haven't seen either of the two Nymphomaniac films, and a few others. I haven't seen Mandalay, which is kind of like the follow-up to Dogville, right?
Yeah, it's in the USA trilogy, whatever, right? So, so that was the other thing I was reading about, was that I guess a lot of people took this movie as being very, I guess he in general is very anti-American. Like, he apparently hates America, despite the fact that he's never even been there. That's what
I don't know if that's quite right. I think he's probably,
that's what I read anyway. So
I think he's anti-American hegemony as opposed to anti-American. I think he's probably against the widespread dissemination of American and specifically Hollywood culture as like the default form of entertainment, or I think, my guess, I don't know, maybe he hates Americans. I doubt it. He doesn't strike me as a man that would be that petulant and childish. I think he's just kind of against.
I don't think he hates Americans. I think he hates America and what what they stand for.
I doubt it's against the kind of American democratic process and all that. I think it's more the kind of cultural hegemony, I think, is probably a problem for him, and the way you're kind of force fed, Disney, McDonald's, and all that stuff around the world.
Right.
I wouldn't want to speak on his behalf, but
I did find it interesting, though, that despite the fact that this was a very meant to be small town America film, all of the big actors, like all of the main cast, none of them were actually American, right? So I mean,
right.
So I don't know if that was on purpose or it just happened that way, but so if that was also like a fuck you to America or something, but I don't know.
I don't know. I think there's just so many other modes of making.
I mean, it was like, I read a lot of like reviewers talk about how like his idea of America, like everyone has a gun, it's all gun-toting gangsters, that kind of idea, and that was kind of like where he comes from, kind of thing.
I don't know. He strikes.
I don't know if that was just the Americans with the chip on their shoulder, kind of thing. So,
he strikes me as a man who's probably way too smart to think.
To be that. That sort of simple mind.
Still my favorite to this day, though, is Kingdom, the mini series he made. That's still my high watermark for Laz. That's what I was most impressed. That's what I enjoyed the most. That's what really knocked me sideways when I first saw it was Kingdom.
I will say, revisiting Dogville, I mean, what I've seen, revisiting House of Jack Built and revisiting Dogville has definitely inspired me to go off and watch more Von Trier. So at least I'm intending on watching more now. This sort of happened when we did Big Lebowski, where I revisited that, and then I went off and I watched all the Coen brothers because I just maybe I need to give him another chance. So, and the same thing with Von Trier now. I'm going to go back, and my intention is to watch everything I can get my hands on whenever I can.
Actually, so. I will fill in the blanks. I haven't seen The Idiots. I should probably definitely see that because it's considered one of the big ones. And there's a few bits and pieces I haven't seen, and maybe revisit some ones that I wasn't so keen on. There's a very early film of his called The Element of Crime. I remember finding that fairly dreary when I first saw it. It might still be fairly dreary, but it's an early work. But
do you have a copy of Kingdom?
No.
No. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure, I can get one. Though.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you can find one, please send it my way.
Yeah. Let Kingdom for Ron's Christmas present. Right.
Right. Okay. Well, is that it? You got anything else to say about Dogville?
No. I think it's a work that very much speaks for itself. I would highly recommend anyone to check it out, really, because it'll be, I can see how some people might not get on with it, but give it 30 minutes at least, right? Don't let that fucking Brecht guy alienate you, as is his wont.
Right.
Because I think most people would probably find it surprisingly absorbing. Like, I can see why some people, when it's, some people with a certain temperament, when it's over, they might get angry at it, but then kind of forget that, well, you did just watch it for 3 hours and not turn it off. So that says, do you know what I mean? So, yeah.
Anyway, it's definitely worth a watch, at least, regardless of where you fall on it. I think it's definitely notable for a number of reasons. And I mean, I could probably, go around and around and talking about this film all day. So you'll never, it's that kind of film that you could just keep talking about and talking about the elements and why it was this. And I'm sure they could teach classes on this film or films of this ilk. So it's
if it did turn up on film school syllabuses and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. So.
But no, personally, I thought it was quite excellent.
Yeah. And I had seen it the first time. I remember it being kind of standing out a lot. Having a theater background and being like, oh, this is really interesting, and being kind of like, but I couldn't remember. And I remember having generally goodwill toward it, but I couldn't remember if I really liked it or not. But so I was glad for the opportunity to revisit it at least. So.
There's a man walks the streets of London late at night. Jack the Ripper. With a little black bag that's oh so tight. Jack the Ripper. He's got a big black cloak hanging down his back. Jack the Ripper. Well, that's a one big cat that just hate to fight. The Ripper. Jack the Ripper. Well, he walks down the street, every girl he meets says your name is Blau. When she walks down the street, he's never fall behind. The Ripper, Jack the Ripper. With his little black bag and his one-track mind. The Ripper, Jack the Ripper. Well, he really catches up when the lights go down. The Ripper, Jack the Ripper. 'Cause that's the time he starts his dirty shop around. The Ripper, Jack the Ripper. Well, he walks down the street, every girl he meets says your name is Blau. Jack the Ripper, the Ripper, Jack the Ripper. Scotland Yard will never catch him, 'cause he's a much too clever. He's much too clever. But if they do, man, they'll get the leather, yeah. With the streets of London can never save. The Ripper, Jack the Ripper. Whenever Jack the Ripper ever shows his face. The Ripper, Jack the Ripper. So you pretty little girlies, take my advice. The Ripper, Jack the Ripper. And don't walk the streets of London late at night. The Ripper, Jack the Ripper. Well, he walks down the street, every girl he meets says your name is blah, blah. Jack the Ripper, the Ripper, Jack the Ripper.
So then we'll move on to your choice,
Yes.
which
So
I have.
So I kind of did the looser connection.
So I have 3 bones to pick with you with this movie.
3
So,
bones. Wow, that's a hell of a lot of bones.
3 big bones.
Okay, I've got a big bone for you, big fella. So, walk like a man. So yes, my connective tissue is Udo Kier, good old Udo.
Which is my first bone to pick.
Yes, well, he's hardly in either film, but
Yeah, so the bone to pick here is that, of course, I'm supposed to be choosing a loose connection, and you're supposed to be choosing a strong connection. And instead, I chose the strong connection, and you chose the weakest of weak connections for the actor that is collectively on screen for maybe 3 minutes total of both of these movies.
Right.
So
we have discussed Udo before in our Spermilla episode, way back when. So my choice, and Udo being the connective show, is the film Lulu, 1980 French-Italian West German co-production. I think actually made for French television, maybe. Directed by Valerian Borowczyk, a Polish guy who also did the production design. Made some interesting films, actually. Just after this, actually, he did another film with Udo Kier, which Udo Kier is actually in all the way through, called Dr. Jekyll and His Women, which is a very interesting kind of erotic take on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which I almost chose. But I was kind of in the mood to choose something which I hadn't seen before, and I hadn't seen this before. And there's always a risk when you do that. I'm assuming you hadn't seen this film before as well, Ron?
No.
Right. Seen any other Valerian Borowczyk movies that you know of? Okay.
Not that I know of, no.
Okay. So this is based on, so there's a couple of plays by the German playwright Frank Wedekind, and he did like a 2-play cycle, right? Which was called what's it called? Erdgeist, or Earth Spirit, and Pandora's Box. And Pandora's Box is famous nowadays because, of course, they made the silent movie, the 1929 film Pandora's Box, starring Louise Brooks in that very kind of iconic, kind of sexy short hair. She's become one of those icons of cinema, right? Is Louise Brooks in Pandora's Box.
Also, one more point about Wedekind is that Wedekind is a pretty well known and respected dramatist, and recently he's become kind of had a resurgence in popularity because of Spring Awakening.
Right.
Yeah. So which was made into a musical not too long ago, like maybe 10 years ago, whatever, and has become was huge hit on Broadway. So that's sort of Wedekind.
Did you ever get a chance to see it, or?
I saw the TIP production of it. So.
That's Tokyo International
Players. Yeah, here it was a amateur production version of it here in Tokyo. So which was not much to write home about. So
apologies to all TIP.
As most TIP shows are.
Wow.
With the exception of Night Must Fall, which was a masterpiece.
Oh man, that leading guy, I don't know who he was, but smoldering charisma.
Yeah.
Brackets. That was me, by the way, listeners. Close bracket. So people are kind of more familiar with Pandora's Box than this first part, although they both seem to have, spoilers, by the way, again, as usual, they both seem to have Jack the Ripper or Jack the Ripper surrogate kind of at the end of the play, which is kind of confusing to me. I'm not familiar with the plays, but so this one ends with our main character being killed by Jack the Ripper. And then I believe Pandora's Box is, I think it's the same character, but I guess they've restarted or rebooted, and then she gets killed by Jack the Ripper again. So I'm not quite sure if they actually play as prequel, sequel, or part 1, part 2. They're just kind of adjacent or something like that.
Reboot.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right, and Jack the Ripper having the world's smallest knife is like a Swiss Army knife that he had in his pocket.
So the basic story of this one is it stars Anne Bennett, and she's kind of like I guess I suppose the phrase would have been in those days, she's a loose woman, or a loose woman of loose morals. She's like a dance. I guess she's a dancer, trained dancer, artist, model, floozy, and I suppose we're led to believe that she's supposed to be a kind of amoral character, right? So,
but I think also important is that she's supposed to be like really, really, really beautiful, to the point where people like men just, or not even just men, women also, everyone just lose their shit over her. That she's like, people become insane because of her, basically.
Right.
Yeah, so.
And that's kind of one of the I mean, not to get personal here, but I mean, Anne Bennett isn't an ugly woman or anything like that, but she's no Louise Brooks. Let's put it that way.
Right. She definitely doesn't inspire me to like kill myself over her. Yeah.
No.
So,
And I think you can say that. I mean, obviously these things are always subjective, but I think you could say this actually at an objective level as well, because I think for this kind of character, you need to cast someone has a kind of a beauty that is objectively beautiful, right? Like everyone could, even if she's not your type, yes, she's beautiful, but Anne Bennett doesn't have that look to her, right?
Yeah, she's rather plain. I mean, again, no offense to her, but it wasn't like. I mean, she definitely wasn't everyone's type, and you couldn't objectively say that.
And she's got a nice body on her. I'll give her that.
Yeah.
And then it reminded me a little bit of John Boorman's version of Excalibur, where he, cast his own daughter, who I'm sure is, beautiful in his eyes, his little princess, as Maid Marian or whatever. And she doesn't quite inspire the levels of lunacy that people go to bed her, right?
Right. Yeah, I could be wrong, but didn't I read something about this movie that one of the husbands was her father, was Anne Bennett's father?
No, her real life husband is in it. Heinz.
Oh, I'd read somewhere that her real life father was one of the husbands or something.
No, that's. Okay. Oh, maybe it's her dad. Oh yeah, that would make more sense. Maybe that is her dad. Yeah. The one that she doesn't actually have like a sex scene with, whatever. Right. Yes,
is actually her real life father or something.
Yes, there we go. Heinz Bennett. Yeah. So basically, she's kind of a kept woman, I suppose, and there's an old guy who's looking after her, but then she ends up fucking this the artist Michel Placido, and the old dude comes home and he catches them at it, and he has a heart attack. And then I guess they don't explicitly say, but I suppose she's inherited all his money then. So then,
I think because she was married to him that she that she was the widow, right? So she was in the will, I guess, right?
So she and the artist end up kind of living in a certain amount of opulence, right? And the whole bunch of other characters kind of can't keep their hands off her, basically, and she kind of plays them off against each other. Murder occurs, and
murder and suicide. Some of them, the artist kills himself because of his love for her, and she's gone off to somebody else or something like that, right? So
there's a woman as well who wants to get all lesbian with her, and eventually she ends up with some other characters kind of on the run. I suppose they end up in London then, I guess. I guess the beginning of the film takes place in either Paris or Berlin or somewhere like that, some European capital. And she ends up kind of on the game on the streets of London, and
she descends to poverty. So she goes from husband to husband to husband to husband, and then they all die for whatever reason, and then ends up finally at the end kind of living in poverty as a prostitute.
And there's a couple of associates who help them kind of roll the johns, right, and steal their belongings or whatever. But she ends up being killed by Udo Jack the Ripper Kier and his small knife. And that is kind of about it, right?
Yeah.
That is the story. So, okay, let's get your bones out of the way first then, Ron.
Well, the first I already said was that the choice was a bit suspect. You know, the fact that Udo Kier had less than a minute of screen time in Dogville and had like less than 2 minutes in this movie, and that's your strong connective, which was a bit suspect. I think.
Bone number one.
Bone number one. Bone number two was I already wrote you about, which was the subtitles and the track of this movie. So the version you sent of this movie has subtitles, and the subtitles are essentially gibberish, right? I watched about 5 minutes and I was like, I can't understand what anyone is talking about. So I turned it off and I was hoping there was better ones. So there was something on YouTube they dubbed version on YouTube.
Yes.
So I watched so there's the one on YouTube with the dubbed version, and the dubbing is pretty terrible. And
I thought the dubbing's okay. I mean,
really?
Yeah.
Well, I thought I thought the acting of the voiceover actors. I mean, I couldn't hear the original, so I don't know how terrible it was, but it definitely was not.
It's all very of a certain heightened type.
Yeah, it was all very this kind of heightened thing.
Yeah.
And
so I ended up watching it, because the way I ended up watching it was I synced them up pretty much. I turned the sound off on the other version and I just had the audio from the YouTube, and they went out of sync every 20 minutes maybe, so you just have to pause one couple of seconds, and then is that how you ended up watching it as well?
I watched like the first half with just the YouTube.
It's bad quality though, isn't it? The YouTube.
It was really bad quality, and then but again, it depended on where I watched it, because I was watching it not at home, so I couldn't do the syncing. And then when I came home, I tried the syncing as well, and that at least was better quality. So I did both ways.
Right.
So anyway, it was a chore to get through in terms of just this understanding the subtitles and syncing up and stuff like that. So that was
bone number two. Now, I suspect I knew that would be one of the bones. Now I'm interested what the third bone is.
Okay, the third bone. Well, other than I got a bone for you right here, is I'm gonna be Gino in comparison to his night creatures, or not night creatures. Sorry,
Attack of the Beast Creatures.
To Beast Creatures.
Yes.
And my bone number three is that this movie is fucking terrible. Hated.
Oh, okay.
I hated every second of this movie.
Oh, okay. I was pretty sure that you wouldn't love it.
I really didn't.
Again, not before watching it. I'd never seen it before, and I certainly didn't love it either. But I'm kind of surprised that you hated it quite that much.
Well, I'm exaggerating. And
what comedy?
I'm excited. But I really didn't enjoy this movie at all. It was really felt like quite a waste of time. I didn't enjoy the heightened version. Like everything was heightened, and like I didn't like every time a husband would die. I mean, she had like 4 or 5 different husbands die throughout the thing, or people die,
or suitors
or whatever. And every single time they would die, they would play this what can only be described as circus music.
Yes.
Which I was like, what is happening, right? So, and I didn't understand if I was supposed to be like, if it was supposed to be comedic or if it was dramatic, or like I didn't know what was happening. Like it just the music, like if it had been different music, I may have had a different reaction to it. But the music almost ruined it for me, because I couldn't understand what I was watching. If it was supposed to be funny or dramatic, and because there were dramatic scenes, but it was very much like a happy, like I expected clowns to come on.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. I would agree with you on that point. It does have this very kind of bombastic, like brass band score.
Yeah.
And we were talking about Brechtian alienation devices before, And because this film is also, even though it does have production values, it's not that difficult to see its origins as a stage play.
Right.
So yeah, so I was thinking about it in terms of, is it supposed to be like in that way? Like, it's almost like, even though it's a very serious story and it's very grim, if they're trying to go for the, oh, isn't this like farcical, like the farce of the tragedy of life or something like that? But no, I agree with you. It just doesn't work. It's not a juxtaposition that makes you think. It's just a juxtaposition that makes you think, what the fuck? Like, it's
who fucking scored this shit? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. No,
I mean,
it's not a good choice. It's not a good choice.
Yeah, I didn't even think about what you were just saying, that if they were trying to do it specifically as like an alienation technique to draw attention to, I didn't even think about that. But I mean, that's interesting if it was, but it's
counterpoint or something.
Yeah,
like that.
But it didn't work.
No,
if it did, because I didn't get it, and also because I'm fairly certain it wasn't that that it was just that they just chose bad music. I think.
I don't know. I'm more akin, maybe just because I'm slightly more familiar with Valerian Borovchik. I'm tended to think that maybe that's what they were trying to do, but
really?
I agree with you. It just doesn't work at all. Right?
Yeah. So, and it's like the one element that makes what would be like a meh story to the point of like, well, oh, this is really awful to watch. Like, I just didn't enjoy watching this at all, right? So
yeah, it is a bit of a meh story. I think that's the other problem with it as well. Is it's just not a particularly gripping narrative.
Yeah. It's just, she likes this guy, and there goes this guy, and he kills himself, and then he dies, and then she dies, and then goes to the next one, and then goes to the next one, and now she's a prostitute, and now she's dead. I was like, okay, well, I didn't know what I was supposed to get out of this story, and like it was just, there was just.
Have you ever?
Yeah, I understand that she's supposed to be this sort of like deadly beauty that that inspires people to kind of like kill themselves over like their love for her and stuff. But it like, I never got that depth into it. Like, there was no depth to the story. It was just like, okay, now he's dead. Okay, now he loves her. Don't know why, but he loves her. Now he's sad. He's gonna kill himself. And now, it's just. There's nothing to it, right? So
I agree with you. It's a very glossy kind of surface. I don't know if you've ever seen Pandora's Box, the silent film. So considered like a classic, and I have to admit, I think Pandora's Box is one of those films that hasn't necessarily dated that well. It's quite good, but it's very difficult to, for me anyway. I certainly wasn't blown away by it, but I can see why Louise Brooks became iconic image and all that, and it deals with a lot of the same themes, but yes, in a way that is so the only thing that this was interesting to me, and this is inherent, I think, in, again, I'm not familiar with the Wedekind plays, but I'm assuming this is inherent in the original play, and is the whole notion about, so it's interesting how, so she's this kind of vamp, right? She's kind of like this, the ultimate femme fatale or whatever. But at least in this version, I think you're supposed, they a little bit play around with the idea of, well, even if she is a vampish kind of amoral kind of character, and she's kind of aware of how much trouble she's causing, there's also a little bit about, well, it's the dude's fault as well for just not controlling themselves, right? Well, I get the feeling from Pandora, if my memory of Pandora's Box, it was slightly more just, here is evil incarnate in a female form, and there's not so.
Oh, she was like an evil person. She was like,
well, not evil, but it's more like, that kind of animalistic femininity, not to be trusted, a little bit, getting back to Lars von Trier, plays with that a little bit, Antichrist as well. Yeah. And but in this film, I think they were trying to, she has a few lines of dialogue about, like, well, you do have free will, right? Like, I'm not actually forcing, you basically, you just can't keep your hands off me because you're only kind of thing. I'm not sure if you could blame me for that. So they do dose out the blame. It doesn't strike me as a kind of misogynistic film in that way, but like you said, it doesn't really have the depth. That's just something I picked up. In a way, my brain kind of scrambling around to try and find something of interest. And it might be there in the original play, or I'm not quite sure, or maybe I should be giving giving this film accolades for, maybe that isn't the way it's normally treated. Maybe this film is coming at it from a different angle. I don't have
maybe the play was misogynistic and they're just trying to
so I'm not sure about that. Someone more well.
Yeah, but I wasn't quite sure if I was supposed to like her or not. Like, she's kind of presented as the protagonist rather than the villain. Yeah. So I was confused. I was like, am I supposed to be feeling bad for her because these people keep dying on her? And now that she's descended into prostitution and now she's poor and stuff like that, should this be something that's a tragedy? Like, I should feel bad for this character, but at the same time, I didn't feel anything for her because she was very like when the very first scene when her old husband comes in and has a heart attack, she is basically, okay, let's get rid of the body. Like, it was like there was like not even an element of surprise that he had just died. Like, it was just sort of like, oh, he's dead. Okay, now let's get rid of him. Right? It was. I mean, even if it would have been like they were planning this and then that it was like it was part of their plan and she is the villain or the anti-hero or whatever, that would be something. But it was just sort of like, well, wait. So they acted as if they expected it, but there was no surprise. And so I was like, well, am I supposed to feel bad for you or am I supposed to feel happy for you? I didn't know anything what I was supposed to feel. So it was.
I think my problem with it was also the fact that not so much whether she was likable or sympathetic or something. I can kind of deal with a film full of characters I don't like, but that was compounded by the fact that she's also a boring character.
Boring, yes.
There's nothing to her, and then if at the same time you don't have a raging hard-on for her either, then it's kind of, I'm not quite sure why I'm watching this woman's story. Yeah,
and that was actually my main point that I was just going to get to, is that no matter what the flaws with this movie, it was just fucking boring. It was really boring to watch. It was like, so it was. I
don't know. I have to admit,
I was bored.
I find it boring myself. It was,
No?
No, it's because it's not too long. It's like 80 minutes or something.
Yeah.
And, there's things are happening. And I was kind of interested to see, not that the story was pulling me along, I was just kind of interested to see, as someone who was kind of interested in Borowczyk, I was kind of wondering where this was going, I suppose. I expected it might pull something out the bag, and, where's Udo Kier going to be in this?
Yeah, I was like, that's my thing. I was like, where's Udo Kier? Where the fuck is he? Oh, well, there he is in the last minute.
So I wasn't actively bored. I watched the thing all the way through. I just got a feeling, by the end, I was just, is that, the famous song, is that all there is? I felt slightly shortchanged. And I don't really have much to say about it really beyond that. And if it wasn't for the Vedic stuff and all that to talk about, then I would have had even less to say about it.
Less to say,
5 minutes, and that was it.
Right.
Was there anything at all like positive or notable about it that you could pull out?
Yeah. Again, I don't want to go into like histrionics about it. That I was like, this was the worst we ever made. I mean, but it was. It was just. I just finished it, and I was like, that was not. I mean, the music was terrible. I didn't really like the acting. I didn't like the heightened elements of the acting. I just found it annoying. It was, my irritation was compounded because the subtitles or the dubbing, the voice acting was really heightened as well. And I was like, it felt very like, it was like a stage. If you want to go back to like having a more of a stronger connective tissue with Dogville, it was almost like a stage play that they had filmed. That was, but they didn't. At least with Dogville, they trying to find that medium you were saying about finding that fine line between playing for the back rows versus playing for film. Whereas this one just did for the back rows. They were still doing the back rows, but it was on film, so it just feel irritating on film and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that it could have been an interesting story had it been handled a little differently, or if it had a little more depth to the script. I think there's something that could be explored there. Maybe
certainly
more,
in the play, I think the
Yeah,
play
yeah.
is kind of an interesting. You can see why it was. There's themes there
Right.
that are of interest.
Right.
Certainly, yeah.
right, yeah. So yeah, it was just not a successful version of it, I guess, right?
No,
So
I agree with you, and I sorry about that wrong. But that's what happens when you choose things you haven't seen before.
it's a risk, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And-
I actually had thought that maybe you had seen this before and you were choosing this specifically, so I was like, why would you choose this again?
No, it's not Valentine's Day yet, so.
Okay, right, okay.
No, it's certainly as well not a good gateway drug if you're. I mean, Valerian Borovchik does have a cult following, and he does have some.
What are some better Borovchiks?
Well, like I said, the one you made straight after this, Dr. Jekyll and His Women, is probably the one I've enjoyed the most. And I can certainly see Borovchik might be an acquired taste. And he also did some quite interesting, some animations he made, like in the late 50s, one called Les Astronauts, which is very, must have been one of the things to have inspired Terry Gilliam's animations on Monty Python.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's definitely an interesting cat, and he has better, more interesting films than this. So this isn't a good starting point for your, which it was for you. So apologies for that again. It's not a good starting point for Borovchik. And plus as well, I think it's, low on the, Borovchik fans would probably put this not high up on their list of,
right.
Along with, because this is a little bit later on in his career as well. And like I said, he did make the very good Dr. Jekyll and Women after this, but then later on in the 80s, he ended up doing like Emmanuel 5 and stuff like that, and so, yeah, maybe
paycheck stuff. He lost his vision, and he was just doing for paychecks.
Maybe so. Yeah, so so he's kind of got that interesting crossover thing that Tinto Brass has to a certain extent, where he's one half visionary artist, other half an apologetic dirty old man, kind of. I find that dynamic quite fascinating. And same as Tinto Brass, like some Tinto Brass films I just can't get on with at all, and then other ones I find kind of interesting. And there's definitely that push, and I quite like it when, because I think that's one of the problem people have with so-called art house films, right? Is, for instance, they're very polite, or they pretend that they're not interested in titillating subject matters, and they try and. So I always like it when there's someone who makes, who has this reputation as like an art house artist, or they make things that are very literary or stuff, but also they're like unapologetic. No, I also like sex and violence. I love tits and action scenes. I like when you have that kind of mix, right? And Borovchik's films certainly fit in that category sometimes. But and this one does that to a certain extent, but just not in a very interesting way. So yeah, I think we both give Lulu a pass, right? You don't bother with
don't bother, yeah.
Lulu, no. There we go. There's your magic morning wood. Any highly amusing witticism you have to lead us out on, Ron?
No.
Okay. Do you want to sing a Walk Like a Man duet with me? Do you want to?
I was okay. You do Walk Like a Man, and I'll do some circus music underneath.
Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Listen to the word out of the girl.
I'm walking down the streets of get home. This bad old man's getting near. Well, I saw him up in the tree. Oh, baby, who's? One more time now. This is like Doug sound.